And I spent a lot of time making myself technologically able, let's say. But my health is impaired now, so that's a problem. But I find it difficult to keep up. There's so many things to keep up with, and changes take place so fast. Just as you adapt to one thing, another thing comes along, and it's like that with everything. Your computer changes, your refrigerator changes, your car changes right in front of your eyes. It's updating all the time. And so your knowledge is continually outdated. So you work very hard to develop expertise with something, and all of a sudden it's completely different. I found that very frustrating with Microsoft Word. I really knew the programs, and then they changed the menu. It's like, well, I spent like 10 years practicing how to use that. I really knew it. It's like, well, now the menu's changed, and so all that knowledge is gone. And we have no idea what this intense focus on social media is doing to everyone, but particularly to young people. I mean, can you imagine that nothing you ever did as a teenager could be forgotten? Can you imagine that? God, awful.
I mean, I also look at it from the perspective of hiding behind the phone. And I live in a world where people have said horrible things about me on the internet and on social media.
Yeah, that's fun, eh?
Yeah, it's so fun. I know you have a lot of experience with that, but I don't know them. So I can write that off to they don't even know me, right? But now this happens in school, and a kid can read this and they're in class with that person, or they have a locker near them, and they're like, is that true then? And I think that is such a dangerous and horrible thing for a kid to have to deal with. I very much empathize with kids today and social media, and just, we haven't even talked about pure body image and just pure looks. I mean, you don't know what anybody looks like anymore through social media and filters anymore either. But definitely from at least like a acceptance standpoint, when people say things.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've been concerned about is that, so there's a female pattern of antisocial behavior, and there's a male pattern of antisocial behavior. And the male pattern of antisocial behavior is a lot more physically violent. The female pattern of antisocial behavior is reputation destruction.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And it scales on the internet. See, physical aggression doesn't, right? Because what can you do?
Right.
It's limited.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's not serious. It can obviously be mortally serious, right? It's serious. Yes. But it does characterize a small minority of men, especially consistently.
Wow.
But female antisocial behavior, which is almost never discussed, there's a large research literature on it. Because people have wondered, that if you look at boys and girls, for example, 2-year-olds, I mentioned them, some 2-year-olds are aggressive. And that's by nature, mostly. Okay, so they kick, hit, bite, and steal in groups of 2-year-olds. Now, they're not very harmful because they're 2. But if it isn't socialized, it turns into conduct disorder, and that turns into antisocial and criminal behavior. That's what happens. So most people who are criminal by the time they're 18 were aggressive when they were 2 and weren't socialized. Okay, so now most of those aggressive 2-year-olds are boys. If you define aggression by hitting, kicking, stealing, and biting.
Sure.
But the reputation destruction, that starts early with girls, and that's their form of antisocial behavior. And, we don't know what political manifestation female antisocial behavior will produce, because the complete immersement of men and women in the political realm is new. But to think that it'll be nothing, well, you have to be a complete bloody fool to think that, because obviously the dark side of men has a dark political edge. Why wouldn't the dark side of women have a dark political edge? So, and no, there's no discussion about that at all to speak of. But I can't help seeing it. I see it. I think that's the reputation destruction that's characteristic of social media, seems to be. I mean, I saw it when girls went after my daughter, in particular when she was a teenager, bullying on social media. They use reputation destruction, and it can be unbelievably vicious. Well, you said you've been attacked plenty online.
Wow. Huh. So the social network being as it is, I mean, well, we look at, Chrissy Teigen or people like that. I mean, women have definitely been on the fire for things that have happened on social media platforms. I wonder if it's more men than women then.
Well, that's a good question. That would be a good place to start the research. Like, I don't know who. Now, it's also possible that, there's a large proportion of men who use reputation destruction too online. So I wouldn't say that this is something limited to women by any stretch of the imagination. But I do know that those two patterns of antisocial behavior exist. So, and that one doesn't scale. So that is a relevant issue. So you were asked about body image, or commented on body image too. We could talk about that a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people think that that's a consequence of social pressure, body image trouble. And I don't think there's any evidence for that, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, well, women are more likely to have body image problems than men.
Right.
Okay, so that's the first thing. So, and that's likely because body morphology is more important in mating choice for women than it is for men. Men tend to prefer women who show signs of fertility. That's associated with youth and symmetry. So symmetry is very, very important as a marker of beauty. So we tend to see symmetrical faces as beautiful. Waist to hip ratio, 0.68. That seems to be relatively standard culturally, regardless of body size. And that's associated with cardiovascular health and with fertility. And so there's an ideal female morphology, and any deviation from that causes upset. And women are more prone to negative emotion than men. Not anger, by the way. That's a tougher one. But anxiety and pain-related emotions, women are more sensitive to those than men. Maybe because they're smaller and life is more dangerous to them and they have to be more threat sensitive. Maybe because they take care of infants. And so, one question, I've never discussed this, I don't think, online. Women become more sensitive to negative emotion than men when they hit puberty, not before. And it never goes away after that. Right? So it's a permanent transformation.
Even after menopause, just like...
Yeah, well, the men and women get more stable emotionally as they get older, but the difference between men and women doesn't seem to attenuate. And so women become sexually vulnerable at puberty. So that might be one reason why they would be more sensitive to danger, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of places in the world where you wouldn't walk alone.
Sure.
Right. There's plenty of places where walking alone would make you a valid target even.
Right.
Right. And I would say that's probably more the norm for human societies than the exception. We assume that our relatively safe environments are normal. They're not. They took a lot of work to get safe, like so much work that it's almost incomprehensible. There's just so many things we take for granted that make up that safety. That are invisible because it's mostly there. But I also wonder possibly if women's nervous systems are optimized for the woman-child dyad and not for the woman. So imagine that, if you have a baby, you're definitely more vulnerable.
Right.
Right. And so perhaps your nervous system should reflect that because you're the one making the decisions. And, because women are more prone to anxiety disorders and depression than men. That seems true cross-culturally. It goes along with that sensitivity to negative emotion. You think, what's the advantage to that? Because it causes a lot of suffering.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Terrible.
It's terrible.
I would love to talk more about anxiety when we get through this topic, but it's crippling for people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's also a good predictor of marital instability because higher levels of negative emotion predict unhappiness, so obviously marital stability or marital instability. But it's certainly possible that women's nervous systems, adult women's, are optimized for the infant mother dyad. I mean, why would we expect it to be other than that? Because a baby is so unbelievably dependent.
Sure.
So and Well, so there's all sorts of adaptations that have to take place to that. You have to be more cautious once you have an infant, especially one under 1 year old, but even, under 3, under 5 for that matter.
So then it comes into saying what is the point? And so if anxiety comes in, if that is a natural, a biological shift once you hit puberty, for precaution for self as well as child, then we know all the negative. I mean, the negative side effects seem very loud, but what are the positives? What are the positives of anxiety?
Well, you're more likely to stay away from danger.